Okay, NAL recap for day number 4. This is for the 2022 season, stage number 2. So I guess I could have mentioned it in a previous video, but they announced the location for the upcoming major. It's going to be in Berlin. That's in Germany and Europe, of course. If you live outside of Europe, it might be difficult for you to go financially or just even logistically, I guess. But if you live in Europe, and I guess if you live anywhere near Germany, maybe you can get over there and you can support support Rainbow Six and perhaps support your hometown teams. They might need the help because they did pretty poorly at the last major. Okay, back to talking about NAL here. First game of the day is Xset versus Beast Coast. Today was kind of a crazy day. My predictions are are in absolute shambles. I do think like 4 of these games realistically, at least 3 of them, I suppose, realistically felt like they were about even, and this isn't one of them. This felt like it was decently in Xset's favor. I wasn't going to be super surprised to see Beast Coast win, but I in fact was a bit surprised to see them win. It did feel like it was going to be an Xset victory. We go to Bank. This is where the 2 teams played last stage, and it was a pretty decisive win, 7-3 for Xset. I do think a couple of those rounds could have maybe gone Beast Coast's way. They got a little bit sloppy. It could have realistically been 5-5 at one point, and then it could have gone either way from there, but the scoreline didn't end up being so close. A little bit of a reverse of fortune here with Beast Coast taking it down 7-5, and Slash comes up massive. We'll look at the stats in a moment. Other maps that we could have gone to, I mean, clearly Cafe and Villa were the other 2 that went pretty far, but just sort of looking at it here, it feels like this was probably going to be the one. Xset had the very final choice, Villa or Bank, and I think they probably just thought we're quite good at Bank. We beat them on Bank last time. Let's do it again. And so we go there, and the community prediction, 95% in favor of Xset. This is one of the more decisive ones, and I don't think it quite felt that lopsided. Maybe if I think I'd be less surprised by this if Beast Coast hadn't just beaten Space Station, but they did. If they were still on 0 points, I think this would be fair to say, but they did get that solid win over Space Station. Xset also having a win. They both have 7-4 wins over Space Station. They both had pop-off players against Space Station, but obviously Xset above Beast Coast on the standings based off a Mirage game is where they got their other 3 points. So I think this is a little bit unfair, but still I would say this felt like an Xset favored game going into it. And you'll see a really good game from Yaga as he's had all stage. He's by far, I think, the highest rated player in the league at the moment. And then an even better game from Slashug. 1 less kill, but he had 2 fewer entry deaths. He had a much higher cost, and he had a plant. They both had one round where they basically just won it. Yaga, a 1v4 clutch, and that maybe will be the play of the stage at the end, just in terms of how impressive it was. He was just on an island, and he had to get 4 kills, and he did. It was crazy. I think it was post-plant, wasn't it? I want to say it was. He was a defender. And then Slashug also did it on the defense. It was a 1v3. He gets the first kill, and then he goes under, and he C4s the planter, and then he wins on time. Doesn't actually get the last kill, but he didn't need to. So I think I want to say this is the first really good game we've seen from Slashug since he's returned. He didn't have a very good stage last stage, and up to this point, I don't think especially impressive. But if you're going to go big every once in a while, I mean, it's nice when it basically secures your team the win. I think Yaga even fell off after that clutch. He was in round, I don't even remember, maybe round 9 or so, and then he got maybe a kill, maybe a couple kills. I think it was like 1 kill after that, so he didn't do too much. And you'll notice the much higher cost, so the impact of Slashug was distributed over a lot more rounds than Yaga's was. Only 2/3 a round for him, and almost every round for Slashug. We also see a good performance coming out from Surf and from Spirits, and then everyone else doing kind of badly, especially the other 3 Xset players, and then I guess the other 3 Beast Coast players doing a little bit better, with all 3 of them being rated more highly than the other 3 Xset players. And I guess that's going to do it for this game. We'll move on to game number 2. All right, Oxygen versus Sonics, the second Bank game of the day. Second game of the day, not the last Bank game. We'll see either. The next one will also be played on Bank. And this seems like a neutral-ish map. Seems like as good a map as any to go to. Neither of these teams played it last stage, but they both played it earlier this stage once each. Oxygen just beat TSM on it 8-6. It was a little bit of a comeback victory, so probably they should have lost. They did win the last 3 rounds pretty decisively, but the round before that, which if TSM had secured, would have secured them the game. They had to make a little bit of a comeback. TSM kind of let it slip, and Sonics played it against Astralis in the first day. They lost in round 15. That was even against Astralis with their coach in, but Astralis is still pretty good, and not that call out is really a slouch. So it seems fine enough. The other map that Sonics could have chosen at the very end was Clubhouse. Pretty good map for them, but they did just take a loss to TSM TSM on it recently, so maybe they feel like there's some issues that they had that they felt, and that also that Oxygen could probably exploit as well. And Oxygen pretty good on Clubhouse generally too, so they opt to go to Bank instead. So again, pretty neutral. Even though Sonics took a loss, Oxygen took a victory. They each have similar VODs with 14 or 15 rounds of information on the other one very recently, and one of them secured 1 point, one secured 2 points, whatever. I think Bank was a fine enough choice, and it ends up working out for Sonics pretty massively in favor of Oxygen for the community prediction. Oxygen, the only undefeated team coming into this day. Every other team was 2-1 or worse, and they only had 7 points because they had to win in overtime for a couple of their games. They had to come back in all of their games. So Oxygen a little bit shaky, and well, they would have had to make a comeback to win this one, and finally they failed to make the comeback, so their streak comes to an end. I probably would have given Sonics a little bit more credit. They did just take down Dark Zero pretty handily in the play day before this, so I mean, I'd probably at least give them 20 or 25%, but this isn't like odds or anything. This is just community prediction, so it's kind of whatever. All right, looking at the stats here, Kansan continues to be quite good, and Rexon doing pretty well as well, 5-0 on entry. This puts him as, I think at the end of the day, he's tied in terms of entry differential with Achieved as I think +7. So this is, well, most of it right here. But yeah, this stat line obviously is super impactful. Other than that, his team went equal with a +1 here and a -1 here, and then +5. So yeah, that is pretty big, massive. And then Grixer doing quite well, as he generally does, and Yeti doing fine, and then Super doing kind of whatever. He is playing the hard sport, and then he's playing sort of like suicide spots. He's changed up his position on the team. Before he was always playing smoke, and so a lot of times he was the last one alive. And then Kansan being one of the most clutch, if not just the most clutch player in the league, they put him on smoke so that he can be in more clutch positions, and then Super can just play these sort of island positions, and they can maybe sort of play around him. And then over on Auction, it's vertical on top. Finally, we see Newers not on the very top, but he did okay here in sort of third place on his team. A pretty good game from Dream, all things considered, and then Foxay and Laxing. Laxing slacking the most. I guess he is the one you'd maybe point a finger to for the reason that they lost, but it's always a team effort, right? It is what it is. And so, as we'll see at the very end, this is sort of building up a trend with Beast Coast winning, and then with Sonic's winning, of the standings coming closer and closer, and they are really, really close. Again, we'll look at that at the end. I think that's all for this game. Let's go to the third game. Astralis versus TSM, another Bank game. Luckily, it is the last Bank game of the day. I think Bank is a fairly fun map to watch, but watching any map 3 times in a row can get a little bit old. And so with TSM taking this victory, taking the full 3 points, they are undisputed at the top of the board. They're on 10 points, and they've been at the top of the board the entire time. Technically not ever in first place, but they've been tied in first place in terms of points since day one. They had 3 points, and then they were on 6 points tied in first, and they're on 7 points tied in first, and now they alone stand at the top with 10 points. And there are several teams still on 7, and at this point in the day, it was already clear they would be in first place because X had already lost and Oxygen already lost. Those were the 2 other teams that were tied on 7 points with them at the top. And so they are, I guess, the one top team, and then there's sort of one team that is at the very bottom, and then there's basically 8 teams that are all very close in terms of points. So should be quite exciting going forward from here. But let's talk more about this match. Yeah, we go to Bank, and TSM quite likes this map, and I think Astralis also likes this map. The most notable thing here is the fact that Astralis did not pick Oregon. They had Oregon as the final pick, and just very curious choice. That is, I talked about it in the previous video, probably Astralis' best map, and they are probably the best team on it in the world. And I imagine their thinking was that if TSM let it get this far, Oregon, the map that they are so good at, like TSM must have really, really prepared Oregon for them specifically. TSM only played Oregon 1 time last stage. It was against SSG, and they lost in overtime. So a decent result, but SSG didn't even make the majors, so not the most impressive team to take to overtime. And so they're only playing a loss, whereas Astralis, between last stage and at the major, I think they were 5-0 on Oregon. So they beat Mirage, they beat Dark Zero 2 times, once at the major and once during the stage number 1. They also beat Oxygen, and they also beat Xset. So at the major, they played all 3 NA teams, and they beat them all on Oregon. They're just so good at it. And so that does mean there is a lot of information on them on Oregon, but they're just still so good at it. I don't know, it seems strange with TSM not being especially good on Oregon, and then Bank being one of TSM's favorite maps. And yes, TSM did just take the loss to Oxygen on Bank, and so that is showing weakness on it, and also pretty recent information. But again, TSM probably should have won it. Astralis also showed their Bank in playday number 1. They showed 15 rounds of it, and that was with Callout subbing subbing in for DP Fire, so maybe that changed things up. Maybe that makes the information that TSM could get from it less valuable than normal, but probably they were running some of their more normal strats, at least on attack or defense, and maybe even on both, maybe because Callout probably could sub in pretty well. But okay, a little bit of speculation there. I just feel like they should have gone to Oregon, and it's easy to say in hindsight with them losing. Maybe if they'd won on Bank, be like, oh yeah, TSM might have beat them on Oregon because they let it get so far. But otherwise, I mean, where was TSM supposed to go? Because they don't want to pay on Theme Park. TSM really bad on it. Astralis really good on it. And then Skyscraper, I don't think TSM has played on it, and Astralis have been pretty good on it. Clubhouse, Astralis always banned Clubhouse. This is Chalet is perhaps Astralis' worst map, perhaps TSM's best map. Don't want to play there. This Villa is where Astralis destroyed TSM last stage 7-1. Astralis generally doesn't play Cafe. I don't know if they have played. No, they played it during the major and they weren't especially good at it, so they banned it out here. Border, Astralis pretty good on it. I don't think TSM have played it, and then that leaves the Oregon and the Bank. So the ban phase look like it really heavily favored Astralis. They have a lot of good maps and only a few bad maps, but they have plenty of bans to cover that. But okay, in the end, a little bit questionable. I want to say they probably would have won Oregon, but I can't say that for certain, obviously. So looking at the predictions, yeah, only a little bit in favor of TSM. TSM was on more points than Astralis coming into the day. So Astralis was on 5 points, right? And TSM was on 7. So their advantage there. But obviously Astralis way better last stage than TSM, first place versus 9th place. And so I think this felt about even-ish, all things considered, but the popularity of TSM put them over the edge there. But in the stats, yeah, everyone getting dunked on Astralis besides Forest. Forest just continues to be good. Best KD by far, 3 plans, positive entry. This guy does it all right. And just unfortunately everyone else getting dogged. Going double negative is Shuttle, Iconic, and DP Fire and J-Nano, all almost going double negative, but not quite. And then you can even see in the entry a -3, a -3. So they went -4 overall on entry. Yeah, just in all regards, TSM smoked them, even though it was a 7-5. It looks much less close. TSM having several flawless rounds. I think Astralis actually had 1 flawless round, but TSM had at least 2, and then pretty dominant other rounds. Yeah, everyone going positive on rating here. Bolo seems to be just completely back. Geonidas really popping off the stage. Him and Bolo are like neck and neck in terms of rating, and Bolo's playing these things and Geo's playing these things. So really impressive stage coming out from Geo. And then Merc, Achieved, and Chala not as impressive. Achieved his rating overall is pretty modest, but his entry is quite impressive, which I think we'll look at the end. I think I didn't mention it earlier. He's like top 2 in terms of entry differential along with Rexon. So yeah, TSM looks to be back. Bolo looks to be back. Everybody is in the swing of things, and they're looking crazy. They are on a trajectory to be the top team in the NAL at the end of the stage, but there still are a lot of games to be played, and well, still a couple more games to talk about. So let's talk about the next one here. Dark Zero versus Parabellum, the 4th game of the day, and I think also the 4th game in a row that I got incorrect on my predictions, unfortunately. I did think all of them, besides the last one, could realistically go either way. I would have been very surprised to see Mirage beat Space Station. That did nearly happen, but it didn't. And I was a bit surprised by Beast Coast beating XSET, but the 3 in the middle here, this being the 3rd of which, I really did think could potentially go either way. Parabellum on 6 points coming into the day. Dark Zero on 3 points. Dark Zero just suffered 2 pretty bad losses against Space Station and against Sonics, only getting 5 rounds total between the 2 games. It's pretty brutal. Parabellum looked like quite the force to be reckoned with. They took down Astralis. They nearly took down Oxygen, and their other game, I'm blanking on it. It was against XSET, right? And they took them down in a round 15 game. So they've gone round 15 2 times now and lost 1 and won 1, putting them on to 6 points. So I do think Parabellum looked like the better team coming into the day because Dark Zero struggled so hard in the last two days. We play on Cafe here. This is the first time we've seen Cafe, and this means we've now seen every map except for Skyscraper. So that's cool to see over the course of only 4 days. We've seen every map, and it could have happened earlier potentially. There are several maps that we've seen quite a lot of, especially, I mean, I guess Bank today. And Cafe, not a map that teams like too much. I think it's even sort of hard to determine who the better teams are on Cafe because we do see it pretty rarely. I don't think teams really like playing it, even if some teams are, I mean, certainly have to be better than other teams on it. But Parabellum, I think, generally quite like this map, and I think Dark Zero like it a decent bit. Also, Parabellum gets off to a 3-0 lead, and then Dark Zero wins 7 in a row. Even the 3rd round that Parabellum wins, they probably shouldn't have won. Blaz pulls off a 1v2 clutch when he's like pretty actively fighting 2 people, and he's on 1 bullet of HP. and then he just gets both kills. It was impressive by him, but Dark Zero probably should have won that, and well, it lit a fire under them to win 7 in a row, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, Dark Zero back with a vengeance, and this is another result that brings the standing super close. Everyone is so close to each other other than TSM and Mirage. All right, so looking at the predictions, yeah, it's actually in favor of Parabellum, and I do think it makes sense. Dark Zero struggled so hard in the last 2 days. They have to be a decent bit more popular than Parabellum, so maybe if that wasn't the case, this would be even more skewed, but this is probably about how I felt about it, maybe like a 60% chance or so for Parabellum to win the game. And then looking at the stats, it is once again Gunner and Blaz on top, Penguin not too far behind, and even Eska and Kool-Aid not too far behind. Really, nobody going positive on Parabellum. Blaz having this one clutch, they got the one plant, and it's Canadian leading the way. He did not want to keep losing. 11-5, 2 on entry, even getting a 1vx. Yeah, really good performance from Canadian, and this is turning into a really good stage for Canadian. We'll see if he keeps it up. Pambazoo also doing quite good here, and then Eclipse and Hyper doing well. I think this got to be Eclipse's like best game by far. I want to say he was 8-22 coming into today, and so he almost doubled his kills, went from 8 to 15. And then NJR, a pretty rough stage for him. He's generally a really consistent player, really good stats, and he just hasn't been putting out numbers. This stage might be a big part of the reason why they got crushed so heavily in the last 2 days, but I guess the team has proven that they don't quite need him to perform. I mean, he didn't do especially bad, 0.91 rating, just minus 1 on KD. It's whatever, but I definitely would like to see better performances coming out from NJR. I don't know what his deal is at the moment. And all right, I guess that does it here. We have one more game to talk about, and so let's take a look at that. Space Station versus Mirage. What a game. Yeah, Mirage were looking like they were on track to getting at least points on the board. They were 1 round away from securing at least 1 point, and they were, I think, up 5-4. So if they just won at least 1 round, they would have guaranteed overtime, but if they just won 2 rounds, then they would have secured the game in regulation. Not to be. Space Station pulled themselves together and won 3 rounds in a row to secure it 7-5. We play on Border, and Space Station proved it's a good map for them. They smoked Dark Zero on it, online asterisk or whatever, but still 7-2, quite decisive. They played it last stage. I think the only game they played it was against Astralis, and they lost 7-5 or 5-7, I guess you'd say. But again, that was against Astralis, the best team in the league, so pretty good, taking them almost to overtime. But Mirage, this is the map where they kind of crushed the hopes of Beast Coast. Jesse and Jacob on the desk were talking about how the fact that Mirage beat Beast Coast locked Beast Coast out of the major, but that's not true. Beast Coast, that is, ended the stage on 13 points. Xset ended the stage on 17 points. They were the team that Beast Coast would have had to pass first. That is, Xset was the team in 4th place. So even with the 3 points against Mirage, that still only puts Beast Coast on 16 points. So they would have needed additional points beyond just against Mirage. Obviously, it wasn't in the very last day, so it really hurt their potential. But even when they lost to Beast Coast, they did still have potential to make it, depending on how Xset did in their last 2 games. I just wanted to point that out there. Yeah, so Border, I don't know. Yeah, again, it's good for Space Station, but this is one of the 2 maps that Mirage got a win on last stage, and Mirage is a little bit different than they were last stage, and they just got beat pretty handily by Astralis on Theme Park, the other map that Mirage got one of their wins on. But one's Theme Park and one's Border. One's a lot more structured, hard to play. Border is, I mean, every map is hard to play in their own way, but Border, you're just taking a lot more fights. Everything's a little bit more loose and whatever, and that seems like an environment where you'd not so much want to take a weaker team. I said sort of the same thing about when Dark Zero took Space Station here, and yeah, it almost cost them points, and I guess it cost them some rounds. Maybe the round differential will be significant later, but they did secure their full 3 points, even if it was kind of scary along the way. 98%. Is this the most decisive community prediction we've seen? Certainly this stage. Maybe we saw one that was like 98% last stage. And certainly we've seen 97. I don't think we've seen 99. Maybe we've seen 98. So I think this is either just the most decisive or like tied for the most decisive. But this is about how it felt. Not that Space Station had been indomitable this stage. They stumbled quite a lot, taking losses to both Beast Coast and Xset, even if they got the impressive win against Dark Zero. But yeah, Mirage almost took that 2% prediction rate to at least to an overtime. And we see Nyx on top of the board. He was one of the lowest rated players on the team, just in the league in general. So nice to see him actually putting up some numbers. Kento doing okay here. And I think actually their stats were a lot more impressive before those last 3 rounds that SSG strung together. Finally seeing a good game coming out from Fultz. He's a big reason why they secured this game. +4 on KD, +3 on entry is pretty big. 11 and 7 also coming out from Skies, but not as impressive on the entry or the cost. And then Bosco kind of in the middle here. Good to see him not having a really bad game. Hot and Cold, who was the second highest rated player in the league coming into the day, had a pretty bad game here. And then Rampy is on a little bit of a bad streak. I mean, it didn't end up costing his team points, but yeah, SSG as a whole, not just Rampy, but all of them need to maybe look in the mirror and I don't know. They got to figure something out, right? They're having a little bit rough of a stage, but it hasn't cost them too much yet. They are neck and neck with a lot of teams, but they are one of the teams that got to play Mirage, which is, seemingly by far the weakest team in the league, given that they are on 0 points, whereas everyone else has at least 5. So yeah, that does it for the games. And so I think we will take a look at the stats, and then we'll take a quick look at the standings. So, all right, on to the stats. Okay, so here are the player stats. We'll just kind of go through the leaderboards. Maybe we'll take a quick look at the full stats, and maybe I'll scroll through it just so you can see it all, and for posterity and whatever. If you want to look at this video in the future, you can see where the stats were at this moment in time. Yaga on top by a pretty massive margin, 0.11. It is a good amount to be on the top by. He was in the top 5 before, but now he's passed up the likes of Newers and Hot and Cold. I want to say he was in 3rd place before. And Newers falling off a little bit, not massively. Hot and Cold falling off by a decent amount. Kansan remains up here, and then Xset having Spirits up here puts 2 Xset members in the top 5 by way of rating. I think Geo and Bolo are both at 1.19. They're just off of this, and also Pambazoo, I guess. So 3 players pretty close to making it, but didn't quite. KD, Newers is still on top. Yaga just behind him. Then a pretty decent gap. Kansan, Geo, Grixer. So 2 Sonics players up here. You'll notice quite a lot of Sonics and quite a lot of different Sonics players and TSM players appearing on the top 5 here. We have Geo, we have Achieved. Like I said, Bolo just missing out over here. And then we also have Chala, so that's I guess 3 of the players, everybody but Merc and Bolo actually appearing, but again, Bolo pretty close. So Plants and Entry and Pure KD are all occupied by TSM players. Good to see. Same thing from any given team, and same sort of thing from Sonics, right? Rexon on top, tied with Achieved in terms of kill differential, entry-wise, that is. And then also seeing Kansan and Grixer here by KD. Kansan also here, and then Super here. So not the most in way of plants. I think there are a couple more players on 3, but generally he gets more plants. I imagine he'll have a decent number after the stage ends. But yeah, that is 4 different Sonics players in the categories. Everybody but Yeti up here. Yeti not having too good of a stage thus far, but he's sort of been picking it up. So we'll see where he ends at the end of the stage. And then where was I? Yeah, so entry, we have Rexon and Achievement on top. Forest not far behind. This is like their support player generally, but their roles are a little bit more fluid than a lot of other teams. Penguin and Gunner both appearing on here, both from Parabellum. Then we have Cost, Geo on top, but then Foxay, J9O, Benji Mula, Laxing. It's kind of good to see 4 players appearing high up on the cost that don't actually appear high up on the KD and the entry. It's kind of nice to see how that works out. And then Clutches, Kansan, and Surf, a little bit surprisingly, are the kings of clutching at the moment. Hot and Cold, and then Kool-Aid and Yaga both have 2. Probably some number of other players also have 2. Where's the 1vx's? Yeah, so Yaga, Geo, and Kool-Aid. Everybody else has 1 or fewer. And then finally, Plants. Drip is on top once again. He ended last stage with the most plants. I think even the most plants in the world, right? But certainly the most in the NAL. And he's looking to repeat that. And then we have Forest. So yeah, Forest here and here. Yeah, super impressive. Kool-Aid, Chala, and then Super, and a few other players probably are on 3. Yeah, Dream, Bosco, Super. And those are players that certainly make sense. There are a handful of players that generally don't plant that have like 1 plant, but whatever. We will look at we'll go down the line really quickly. I'll just scroll through this, and I probably don't even really have much to say. I'll just go down the line in case there's anything you wanted to take a quick look at in regards to this. I guess at the time of the video, you can just go on CGG and look at this, but after the next playdate, this will have updated. So it will have changed, and you will no longer be able to access it. So we're almost at the bottom here, and there we go. It's Guerra at the very bottom, the coach subbing in for 1 game. So that does make sense. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about here. We will take a quick look at the standings, and then we'll call it a day. All right, this video is already super long, so I'll just go down the standings and then say a couple of things. From top to bottom, we have TSM, Xset, Sonics, Oxygen, Space Station, Dark Zero, Parabellum, Beast Coast, Astralis, and Mirage. Mirage still on no points, unfortunately. TSM at the very top on 10 points. Everyone else is in the middle here, separated by at max 2 points. So Astralis down here at 5, and then we have 3 teams on 7 and 4 teams on 6. Yeah, TSM seemed to be fully back. XSET seemed to have slowed down a little bit, taking that sort of surprising loss to Beast Coast. Sonic's making a massive comeback, really bad stage last stage, and then even last week only getting the 1 point, getting the full 6 points this week. Oxygen fell off a little bit. They were the only undefeated team coming into the 4th playday, and they finally took a loss. They didn't even get any points from that game. Space Station, probably good for them that other teams sort of had weird results in this final playday. It kept them fairly competitive. They are at the top of the 6-point stack, and then we have Dark Zero and Parabellum, or I guess Dark Zero and Beast Coast were the other 2 teams that were tied on 3 points, and they all got an additional 3 points to put them up here with Parabellum, who failed to get any points, and now they're kind of stuck down here. Fell out of the top 4, but they're in pretty much just as good a position as any of these 3 other teams, and I guess maybe even a little bit better with some of them having already played against Mirage. The teams I think that have already played against Mirage are at a little bit of a disadvantage, and man, I hate to slight Mirage, but it is what it is. So I guess TSM, XSET, Astralis, and Space Station already got their quote-unquote 3 points, so maybe the other teams are a little bit better in that regard. And then I guess Astralis down here, they got 1st place last stage. They're in 9th place at the moment, but obviously they could jump all the way up to pretty much to 2nd, but in theory it'll probably take them at least a few days to actually be in 2nd, because several of the teams above them will be getting points while they're also getting points. And then Mirage, yeah, they were close to getting that win against Space Station, but they failed to get a point on the board. Really would like to see them get it. I mean, points on the board, obviously, but maybe some wins. We'll see if they can get it done. And if not, they're probably going to make roster changes again, I would imagine, because they are hurtling toward that relegation position pretty quickly. And so I think that pretty well does it for the video. Any question, comments, concerns, leave them below. Other than that, a like and a subscription would be appreciated. And so with all of that being said, I will catch you guys in the next video.